Okay, so tonight, everybody, we've got an amazing guest. We have Mr. Jack Rubinacci on our T-minus webinar, T Talks discussion. And Jack is a professional musician and I think also very importantly, a massive supporter of our beloved tinnitus community and a tinnitus, I would say, activist. He has a book out and it's called A Musician with Tinnitus, and you can find that on Amazon. But I love the subheading that goes with it, which is it's called A Musician with Tinnitus by Jack Rubinacci. But importantly, it also says 14 tools that help me perform and cope with tinnitus. And it's blown my mind completely when I read it. It's so powerful, so emotive, so truthful, and so filled with positive solutions. There are problems. Jack learns and will tell us tonight how he reacts to them. And then he creates a solution for those really powerful, insurmountable problems. So welcome, Jack. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much. Very much my pleasure.
I've got so many questions and there will be questions coming in, but I've been through your book 3 to 4 to 5 times. I read and proofread your early manuscripts and I found it stunning. But what you've done to improve it is that I think, which is really important, you've got also very truthful, powerful, professional, medical, professional information as well. So you contain everything. It's like it's a two-pronged attack, which I think is essential, Jack. So my first question is, and it's really the obvious one, is please, can you tell me how you discovered that you had tinnitus and how old were you when that happened? What happened?
So first off, thank you for having me on the show. It's very much my pleasure to be here. The initial tone came when I was 27. And the reason why it came was because I'd been mistreating my ears for years. I was in a band. I'd been in bands all through my early teens. I was a sort of a troubled teen, and I was very sort of anti this and anti that, rebel, got kicked out of school, that sort of thing. So music was my sort of escape. I felt like I found a brotherhood with being in a band and being a musician. So music wasn't just, for me, it was everything. It was my escape. It was how I sort of dealt with the world. So all through my teens in bands, school bands, that sort of thing. And by the time I was 22, I'd done so many gigs. But by the time I was 22, I found the right band. And I was in a band called Honeyman in Birmingham. That's where I'm originally from, Birmingham. And the reason why I mentioned this band is because that's where most of the damage was done. We rehearsed in a room the size of a wardrobe. I think it was about 2.5 meters wide.
Oh, crikey.
And about 6 meters long. And I'm not joking. I think those are actually the dimensions.
Oh my God.
And if you can imagine, in that small room, there's 4 guys. We're all in our early 20s. We're all sort of, really gung-ho. And there's a drummer to my right, about 1.5 meters away. There's a bass cabinet to my left. There's 2 guitar amps and a PA. And we worked very hard. We were sort of, we took on the responsibility of being, we were sort of, the band to watch in Birmingham at the time, and talking about the late 90s now. And, we took that responsibility on. We knew all about the history of Birmingham, how many great bands have come out of Birmingham.
Absolutely.
Especially rock bands, Yeah, so, there's lots of great bands that have come out from there, So we took all that responsibility seriously. So we worked really hard. And what that meant was that my ears were exposed to an incredible amount of noise. We rehearsed 5 times a week. And in the weekends, we rehearsed 3-4 hours a night. It was ridiculous.
Incredible.
And then on the weekends, we'd be often gigging because we were sort of, popular back then, I was in that band for 2 years and I never heard any problems with my ears. It was always, you go to bed at night after blasting music out at ridiculous proportions, and it was never a problem. But then I moved to Norway at 26 and I was recording in my little flat in Oslo. And I was recording a quiet little acoustic number. And I went to bed, and the next day I was exhausted for about 3 days. I just couldn't move. And that's not like me. I'm a very energetic kind of person, and I just couldn't move. And on the third day, I heard sort of the tone come in, and I knew what it was straight away. I didn't have any sort of preconceived ideas that it was going to go away. I just knew it was tinnitus, and I knew it was here to stay, and it was deeply emotional. So to answer your question, it was 27 years old, and that's when my sort of relationship, or journey, as I call it, my journey with tinnitus started.
You say as well in the book, and I gravitated instantly towards it, is that you said at that age, so at 27, you said that you kind of wished you'd gone back later on in life. You said, I wish I'd gone back, because in the book you said you didn't pay too much attention to that warning, even though that, you know, you knew what was happening and you knew exactly what it was, because you were able to actually carry on again and do something like a ridiculous amount of live shows and recording. I mean, I say ridiculous in a positive way. I mean, you were doing lots, but you were aware, but not quite aware. I remember in the book, it startled me, because I did the same thing, and I thought, oh no, Jack, again, if I could talk back to my 22-year-old self, it would have changed most things. I probably would have been deaf, and maybe you might have been, but maybe I wouldn't have had tinnitus. So it's a toss-up. And so, yeah, I mean, what happened then? So you were aware of the tinnitus, but you carried on, didn't you?
Well, I mean, I think there's 2 points in my life that I wish I could go back to. And I say this not sort of as an old man, you know.
No.
I say this because I want other musicians to not make the mistakes I made. That's why I say this. You know, I'm an upbeat type of person, so I don't say this to sort of bring the vibe down. I say this to encourage other musicians to take this seriously. So if I could go back, I would do 2 things. I would go back to the 22-year-old myself, you know, version of myself, and I would just talk to him, and I'd say this rock and roll sort of mythology that we were living out, and we were very much into the lifestyle. We were sort of, you know, tough young lads, you know, inner city sort of thing. And we thought it was, and I was actually saying this on the podcast the other day, the audio podcast.
Yeah.
We were saying that it was almost like a badge of honor that we didn't wear earplugs. We thought we were tough, and we thought it was rock and roll to live out the lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I wish I could go back to that 22-year-old me and say, there's nothing rock and roll about it. There's nothing rock and roll about it. Rock and roll is being myself at 45 and being able to continue. Rock and roll is not having to wear a pair of earplugs just to go down to the shop. That's not rock and roll to be 22 and think you're tough. And if I could go back to another point, I'd go back to a 27-year-old version of myself when the tinnitus first started coming, because when I think of the tinnitus, how it was then and how it is now, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't in the same ballpark as how it is now. And I wish I could just talk to him and say, okay, so you've got this tone in your head now. Now it's time to take it seriously. Because what I did is that at 27, I remember walking around the park. There's a beautiful park in Oslo, and I remember walking around and hearing the wind in my ears, and it just was like a relief, because it took the sound away, you know. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do now? You know, I'm 27. I'm very much, you know, music is my life. It's been my life since I was 14. What am I going to do? And as usual, because I've been an idiot most of my life, I didn't do anything. And that's the problem. That's a very big problem, that I find so many patterns amongst musicians. And now that I'm super sensitive of it, now that my whole life has changed because of tinnitus, I'm super sensitive of it. It's almost like when you buy a car, and you didn't even know, before you bought that car, you didn't even know that car existed. But now that you bought the car, you see it everywhere. You notice the car everywhere. And it's the same thing with me when I notice patterns with tinnitus and other musicians. There seems to be repeating patterns that I'll go through. But the biggest mistake I made was that I didn't do anything about it. So at 30, I made my debut album, no earplugs, music blasting out all the time. We rehearsed in this room. I had some guys come over from Birmingham. We rehearsed in this room. I'm actually based in Norway. If anybody watching, I'm in Norway right now. So we rehearsed piano. I've got a piano here. I play piano night and day, no earplugs, and it's a very loud piano. So I went on, I did loads of shows. At 35, I recorded my second album in America. Again, in the studio, everyone gets excited. You know, once you get towards the end of the album, what happens is that people get excited about the mix and they get excited about the song, so they turn the volume up. The problems didn't really start until I was about 36, 37. I wasn't bringing in enough money. I had responsibilities. I'm a father. So I just took on every gig that I could do, regardless of, I just took every gig I could. And it meant that I was playing, you know, one night I'd be playing in a, you know, opening for a major artist in an arena. And the next night I'd be playing in a small club. I'd be playing in convention centers. So I'd be playing everywhere. And my ears were constantly exposed to sound. And that's when I started to realize that there was a big problem that, you know, I really needed to address.
It's incredible, Jack. Absolutely incredible. I think exactly this is why this book has resonated more than any other book. When I first had tinnitus, I was like you, I was 22, and it was so harrowing. But I was given this book, and it was put on my bedside by my mother, actually. It was very sweet of her, but it was the wrong type of book. It was like going back into the dark ages, because this book had a picture of a man with alarm bells that were like from one of those old-fashioned clocks. I'm not going to read that. It was so negative, which is why reading your book, which is out also on Amazon, it was just so refreshing, because that's why I really was dying to have you on here, Jack. It was my first shout, because the written word is so powerful if it's done correctly, yet it's catastrophic when it's done appallingly. And I did try and read this book when I was 22, and it made no sense to me, and it was just fear-based, and it was just shocking. I've got another question here. We've already got lots, so I'm going to try and intertwine it, because I think some of the questions I've got, I think, are appropriate also to the evening. And another thing that I was gravitated towards with you, it's like we have very similar views on things. It's like you talk about sport, or in a sense, superheroes. That's how I imagine it, as equating to things that will help you with your visualization about what you can and can't do as a sort of being, and a superhuman being, to try and counteract what's going on. And you talk a lot about actually one of my heroes, probably who would be at the top of my list of all-time people, who probably would have made an incredible president, which was Muhammad Ali. And you talk about the rumble in the jungle, the Foreman-Ali fight, and you explain that, I think you said that Ali was 7 years older than him. And obviously we all know that film, When We Were Kings, which is, I think, a most inspiring film for other reasons, other even than the boxing itself, although that's one of the single most bravest acts committed to sport and to film that I think I've ever seen and will ever likely to see in my entire life. It was gladiatorial. And I say this because you look at that, don't you? The idea, and it's something that really came into my mind, was this quote that I think you got from it, and then you've used it, I think, for yourself to positively manifest thoughts and ideas, which is, instead of being defeated by a problem, Ali found a way to adapt and to grow and to move on. So could you explain that and how that works for you, Jack? Because I do know that, but I want you to explain it, because I love it. I think it's absolutely brilliantly fascinating.
Thank you. I didn't find it. That's not a quote. I just came up with that.
Oh,
so,
man, great.
So the idea, yeah. So thank you. So the idea is that tinnitus, in my mind, is both a physical and a mental sort of challenge, meaning that you hear the ringing, you know, you physically hear the ringing, but you have to also sort of get your mind in the right place. And I really, really believe that. And the reason why I got involved in sharing my experience is because about 4 or 5 years ago, I experienced a really bad spike in my tinnitus.
Oh, sorry.
And back then, I'm sort of a private person. I'm not sort of someone who goes on forums and shares their stories. There's nothing wrong with that. I encourage people to do that, but that's just not my style. So I felt terribly alone, and it got very dark. And I didn't know where to turn to. I went on all the forums, all the sort of, information forums, looking for and praying that, something would be coming up down the pipeline in terms of medical solutions. And it got really difficult. I'm a professional musician. I have to sort of play to earn money. And I remember it was in November 17th of 2007, November 16th of 2017. And I had some Christmas shows to play that I had to play. Like I was contracted and everything. And I was having this terrible spike in my ears. And I couldn't find many resources of where I could find help. And I Googled musicians with tinnitus, and I found one guy who had some tinnitus, and he was sort of, gave me a few tips. And then I found a DJ who had actually opened up about it. He's a very well-known DJ. And he'd done an interview in a big magazine. And I actually contacted him and I said, look, I just want to say how much your article meant to me and how inspiring it was for me. He got back in touch with me straight away, and he sent me his phone number. And it was a deeply emotional time for me, because I thought, my God, this guy's a well-known DJ and I'm, just some guy in Norway. And he said, look, if you need to talk, call me. I didn't call him because I didn't want to bother the guy. The guy was constantly on tour. He was like, all over the world, But we exchanged some messages. And for me, the idea that there was another guy out there in my position who could get it done, continue with being a musician, or a DJ in his case, it was inspiring to me. He got me out of that situation. And when I did the gigs and I got through it, that's when I learned that tinnitus is also very much a mental game. So when I wrote the book, I absolutely wanted it to be something that had tools, something that had steps that you could go forward, things that you could action and say, okay, I'm in this situation, but here's things I can do. And I really believe in the idea of heroes and the idea of inspiring people, because I know that the people that inspire us, they were inspired by people themselves. That's how it works. They look to people like, you think of Muhammad Ali, he looked at other boxers, he looked at religion, he looked at religious leaders. Everyone has people, when you see strong people, they have people in their head who inspire them. And it's almost like a chain that goes down. And I think it's very, very important for people with tinnitus to take steps to protect their hearing, but also to take steps to get their mind in the right place. And this is not some mystical meditation, Zen-like thing. I don't do that stuff. I wish I did. I wish I was that smart. But what I'm saying is that if you get pictures in your mind of strong people, there's another example I give, Roger Federer, who I think is an amazing person, athlete, all around amazing, right? And I read a quote.
Yeah, sorry, Jack. I just wanted to say, I love that as well. I just wanted to interject. You talk about the pain aspect, don't you, with Roger Federer?
Yeah. Like, again, during that time, because I was really struggling, I didn't know what to do. I remember reading a quote, and I don't know how I came across it, but he says something along the lines of, being a professional tennis player means knowing how to deal or how to manage playing while being injured or dealing with pain. And again, I was just like, it got me emotional, because I was like, that's how I feel, And I so getting to the point, I really encourage people who are struggling with tinnitus or any sort of challenge that they are facing, look to other people who have overcome challenges, because it will inspire you greatly. Like that film, When We Were Kings, man, I love that film. Like you can't help but stop that film at the end and go, I can achieve anything, I can do anything. And it sounds corny, it sounds ridiculous, and it's pretty much something that you could laugh at. But that's exactly the kind of thing that we need as people that suffer from tinnitus. We don't need to know that there's no cure. We don't need, because we already know that. We don't need to know that there's this and there's that, and the ENT is not going to help you. What we need to know is you can do it. You can get yourself out of a hole. And I'm saying this because I've been in some pretty dark places with my tinnitus. Like, it gets difficult. It gets really, really difficult, especially as a musician, because, you got to pay bills. You got to keep going. You got two choices. You either stop music and give up what you've been working for your entire life, or what you love doing since you're 14. I mean, my father's a musician. I mean, it goes deep, So you either give up music or you find ways to deal with it. That's the reality of it. That's just how it is.
That's incredible. It's a lovely answer. Thank you very much, Jack. And just to go over a couple of things that you said, and one importantly, although you have mentioned certain aspects of it, but say you are in the middle of a spike, which we've noticed that so many people have had this problem at the moment through appearing, with the problems that are exacerbated through lockdown and the feelings of isolation. And one of the most amazing things you said today, and I had a whole conversation with my partner based on this as well, was loneliness, because we have one aspect of the app that we're really pleased with, but we've been developing over this year, Jack, a whole mental package that will go into the app, which we've been designing for over a year now, and I think it's really needed, and it will be very different. And the thing that I wanted to ask you, because yes, the mental approach is really, really important. It doesn't work without one or the other, but it has to be precise and it has to be correct. But how do you deal with a spike? I mean, okay, you're having a spike. What do you do as a backdrop to that spike? How do you affect that in a positive way? What happens?
So in January of this year, we had a guy come around to change the batteries in the alarm, and there was confusion. It was -6 outside, Arctic winds. I have a little dog, a little Maltese Terrier, Mr. Fluffy. I couldn't take him outside because it was too cold. It was blowing an Arctic gale. So I went upstairs. I had my ear defenders on, -35 ear defenders on, and he had to check the alarm once he put the battery in. There was confusion. There was people here. We were all wearing masks. It was all very confusing. And it turns out that he had to have the alarm on for 90 seconds.
Oh,
that was not good for me, because even though I had my ear defenders on and I was upstairs, hiding in the corner, it was still very loud, and it created a big spike in my tinnitus, and it was upsetting because you've been here before. You know what it means. So I had to talk to myself straight away. So the first thing I do is I say, I've been here before. I got through it then, and I'll get through it again. The next thing I do is I say, what do I need to do for the next few days? How can I help myself for the next few days? So I use your app. I use sound therapy, because I actually do use your app. So I use sound therapy. I make sure that I talk to the people around me and I say, look, I need some quiet. I just need things to be down a little bit in terms of volume. And I just need you to be aware that I'm going through a spike. Now, once you get through those first few steps, the next thing you've got to do is you've got to remind yourself that tinnitus goes up and it goes down. So a lot of people ask me about habituation. They say, have you habituated? Do you, how do I habituate? And the reply that I always say, and I think this is really, really important. This is such an important piece of information. Habituation comes and it goes. You are going to go through spikes. And once you realize that, it's almost like you're on a roller coaster. You know that you're going to go up and you're going to go down. You're not worried about it. You just say, okay, I'm going to hold on and go for the ride. But that's the reality of tinnitus. It's not going to be, for most people, some people are lucky. Like I spoke to a guy the other day and he said he hadn't had a change in 5 years. And I'm like, that's great. I'm so happy for you. That's not how it works for me. My tinnitus goes up and it goes down. So the most important thing to remember with the spike is that you've probably been here before. You got through it then. You're going to get through it now. But be proactive. Don't just sit in the room and listen to your tinnitus. Be proactive. And another thing as well that I really think is a very important step to take is distractions. Distractions. And the example that I want to give is that if you can imagine when you go on holiday, if you can imagine the last time you went on holiday, I know that we can't go on holiday now, but in the past, I noticed something. So I was born in Rome. My dad's Italian. So with my daughter growing up, we used to go to Rome every year, and it was great. But then about 3 or 4 years ago, we tried Crete just for a change. It was a big thing in our family because my dad was like, "What, you're not coming to Rome?" Because that's his big chance to see the family, you know? But I said, no, I want to try something different. So we ended up going to Crete. I loved it. I loved the food. I loved the people. I loved the whole vibe. It took me about 3 or 4 days before I remembered that I've actually got tinnitus. And that was a big piece of information for me because you're constantly looking for information. I was like, hold on a minute. I've not noticed I've got tinnitus, and I have pretty bad tinnitus. I mean, I have quite bad tinnitus now. So distractions are important. So if you're going through a spike, get yourself proactive. How can I distract my mind? What do I like doing? I like jogging. Okay, go jogging. I like watching films that are inspiring. Watch films that are inspiring. As people with tinnitus, it's important that we take care of ourselves. And that means being a little bit selfish. And it's okay to be a little bit selfish when you have tinnitus. It doesn't mean you can be moody and nasty to people, but just take care of yourself a little bit. So if you're going through a spike, if anyone is watching this and going through a spike, find the things you like doing and do more of them, because you'll find that your brain will be distracted, and it's amazing what the brain can actually do, because like the brain is so malleable. We know this, right? But as people with tinnitus, we know that the brain is malleable. That's what they tell us, that, you know, the brain, you know, especially as musicians, because our frontal lobe is like a taxi driver. So it's like a London taxi driver. Our frontal lobe as musicians is more developed. It's a different shape than normal people's brains because we've developed different areas of our brain. So the brain is malleable, and it's absolutely incredible. Getting back to the idea of heroes, getting back to the idea of inspiration, find things that you like doing. But the problem with the brain being malleable is that you've also got to be careful, because just as much as it can help you, it can be the other side of it. It can start going down a dark path. So that's why distractions, doing things you like doing, is a massive part of getting through a spike. I think at least.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I think that absolutely makes perfect sense. I'm sure to a lot of people in the community, certainly to myself also, very much so, Jack. There's something else that I wanted to talk about, which I think is really important. And it was important to me, and it's going to be important with the new aspects of the app that we're going to hopefully release at the end of this year, which is, and again, I think it's really important. And let's just talk from your perspective, which is you pay, in your book, you talk about paying very special attention to health professionals and to know all that you can about your own personal route to your own tinnitus wellness. That's through ENT and audiology. Now, I'd like to ask the question, is that because you feel that it is important to learn so that you know about the condition? And does that information help you through it somehow? Does that give you an extra 10%, would you say, when maybe having to combat the spike? So information seems very prevalent to you. So is it important, Jack?
I think it's for me, the important word is being proactive. Whatever that is for someone, whatever that is for you, be proactive. So I want to give an example. I lost my voice in 2017. Between 2017 and 18, I lost my voice. No one could tell me what was wrong. And I'm being a singer, losing your voice is not a good situation. And I went to several different doctors, and nobody could find out what was wrong with me. And I had to keep going. I had to keep going and paying money for private, whatever it took. I had to find out what was wrong with me. In the end, I got to the top guy in Norway. He diagnosed me within 3 minutes, and my voice recovered after a series of months. That taught me the importance of just keep going until you find the right answers for yourself. So if that's finding more information about tinnitus, great. But you got to be a bit careful with that, because you can also find too much information out with tinnitus, and it can become an obsession. And I think that's a problem with people with tinnitus, is that I would suggest find the information that you need, but don't keep going back to it. Don't keep going back to the forums. Don't keep going back to the forums that give you updates on research and stuff like that. Go back to them as much as you need, but it can become a bit of an obsession. And I think that the problem with that is that the more you obsess about it, the more you think about it, the more you think about it, the more you can hear it. And that's a problem. So I think that the reason why I say that in the book, find out information, I think more at the start, because that can help you prevent your tinnitus getting worse. And this is what I mean. If you go back to me at 27, I didn't do anything. I didn't find out any information. I didn't even go on the internet. I just carried on. And that was a mistake. So what I would suggest to people is find out information at the start. Find out all the stuff you need to know. Like you said as well, like you mentioned in the book, find out the tone of your tinnitus so that you can be aware of that tone. Find out if you've got any problems with your ears, sort of any physical damage to your ears in terms of, other things than tinnitus. So find out all that information. But I would suggest that once you've found that information out, learn from it, but don't keep going back to it, because it can become a little bit of an obsession. And I think that's not necessarily good.
That's a brilliant answer, Jack. It's so pertinent for lots of people out there right now. And I think that's a great answer. I really cherish that answer, Jack. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think I struggled with that 30 years ago, 25 years ago, which was obsessing over a problem. I should have let it go and done the research. But what I was doing, and I think a lot of us do that in the community when we're not got everything under check and control, is that we keep going back to see if actually, that sound exposure that I may or may not have had, yeah, it has damaged me. And then, no, it hasn't, says the book. And then you find another one that says, maybe it has. And you're almost looking for your own kind of path to self-destruction, rather than that one answer is fine. The other one is also, yeah, there's an alternate view, but why take that one where, it's still clinical information as long as it's not a lie, which they're not. And it is that thing, isn't it? It's that part of that thing that we do, this bargaining, what if, what happened when, or if I'd have done that, if that would have happened. And it's like, it's very difficult. It's very easy to say, isn't it? But I think you're absolutely right. And I guess also what you're saying, a peripheral kind of route that you're saying, is that you've just got to let it go, haven't you? You've got to, otherwise you can't recover from it. I remember having so many problems with tinnitus, but one of them in 2008 was a botched earwax removal. But I didn't, although I was dealing with the problems of it, I didn't go back, and I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but it was only personal, Jack. I didn't go back and say, look, you've messed it up, I'm gone, that's it, my life's over. I knew that inside, if I went to take somebody to court, then that would be 2 years of me not being able to manage the anxiety attributed to it, because then I'd be almost giving it more proof that something has happened. And it was very important when I was finally able to let go of that. And I think what you're saying is absolutely right. I think that is absolutely it. And it's great to hear it from another person from our absolutely fantastic community, Jack, that you're saying that. It's brilliant. So to go now into the realm of your workplace, okay, which really fascinates me. So you're still a live performer, and I know you do huge gigs, you do all types of gigs, you've got a new album coming out. So what do you do to protect your ears then, Jack? And what type of ear protection do you use? And what's the amount of decibel reduction you use? Because you have to sing. For me, I'm a drummer, so I can have -37, -25, -15 on a light jazz gig. But for a singer, I know that if I was singing, I really have to be aware of all the other outward benefits of being in the live gig. And if I'm blocking off the sound, then it's not good for me. So what do you do?
So at 37, I went down to the ENT and I got my ears molded for professional silicone earplugs. And I laugh when I think about it. She started off with -9 dB filters, and I put them in, and I was like, "Yeah, that's not going to work." So I got sent -15. It's just down the road, but they sent them in the post. It was easier, so they sent them in the post, and I got them, and I got them out. And again, it's a filter because I've actually got a pair on my mixing desk, so it's just a silicone earplug, and it's got a filter at the top that you can put in. and you can change the filter. So she sent -15, and I was like, that's still not good enough. So in the end, I said, what's the strongest you can put in these earplugs? And she said -30, which is just a cap. You actually put a cap on top of the, and those are the ones that I prefer. And I tell you why. They're very nice to put in the ear. They feel good. They're very comfortable. And I've created a system where I have, and this is a very big, very big tool, I think, for me at least. I've got a pair of -30 silicone earplugs in my wallet. They are in a pouch, a leather pouch that's got paper in, so I can change the paper every 3 or 4 times, which is how that's about the amount of times that I wash them. I'm very into keeping my earplugs clean. I don't want sort of any problems. So those go in my wallet. I've got a pair of isolate flares, which are -36, -37. They go on my car keys, because it's happened in the past that I've been to somewhere and I've got my wallet, but I don't have my car keys. And then it's happened that I've just popped into the car and I don't have my wallet. So I need to be covered at all times. So I have a pair on my car keys, a pair in my wallet, and I have a pair on my mixing desk, as I just showed. Those are -30 silicon dB, -30 dB. And then for my gigs, this is funny, I have a pair of hunting earplugs. And these are earplugs that they give to people who go shooting. You know, up around here, there's lots of woods and stuff like that in Norway, you know. So there are people that hunt in this country. And they give them, they're called hunter's earplugs. They're basically a big chunk of silicone that is molded to your ear. And they give you -37 dB attenuation. Now, I remember when I was at the ENT, she knows who I am. She knows I'm a musician. And she's like, Jack, how can you, how are you going to be able to perform with these? And the answer is this, is that you have to train your brain. And the reason why is because I don't have the possibility to play loud music anymore. And for me, that's a strange situation, because I've loved loud music my entire life. I was always the guy trying to turn it up to 11, but I don't have that capability anymore. So I had to train my brain to be able to focus on very low volumes on stage. And when I'm mixing, I mix at about 55, 60 dB, which is, anybody that's a mix engineer will tell you that's ridiculously low. Most engineers mix at about 80 dB. I can't do that, because if I do that, I would have to take 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
So you have to train your brain, and an amazing thing happens. You can do it. You can work at very low volumes. You have to do it if you have tinnitus. Your tinnitus is not going to get better. It can stay flat. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get worse, but if you aggravate it and keep aggravating it, there is a chance that it might get worse. So as people with tinnitus, we have to be careful of volume. It's just a fact. So I can't just blast music out. So I've had to train my brain. And an interesting thing happens. I'm singing better. I'm performing better. I'm writing better songs, because I'm working within my limitations. And it's something that it's not easy. You have to train your brain to do that, because the first thing you want to do when you can't hear yourself that well is you want to sing louder and you want to talk louder. But of course, that's not good. So it's difficult, but again, it's about adapting. And I think a very big, important sort of suggestion I would make to musicians that are struggling with tinnitus, and I think this is absolutely vital. Instead of lamenting or wishing you could go back and regretting the things that you've done and sort of missing the things that you used to do. In my case, it would be mixing at very loud volumes, performing very loud, just being in a band, that sort of thing. Instead of missing those things, try and appreciate the things that you can do. So turning the problem around, you say, well, yeah, I've got tinnitus, but I can still mix. I have to mix at 55, 60 dB, but I can still do it. I can perform live on stage. Yes, I have to be really, really careful. I have to talk to the sound guy, sound guy or girl, and I have to go up to her and I have to say, could you turn the monitors off? And the first reaction, they go, you want them off? I'm like, yeah, can I have the monitors off on stage? And they say, you want the monitors on stage to be off? I'm like, yeah, just turn them off. So I can set up, And this is, if there's any musicians that sort of, when you go back to gigging, this is something that I would recommend you do. Turn the monitors off. I hear and have heard of so many musicians that they're setting up on stage and there's a pop, there's a feedback, there's a cable being plugged in that goes chum, chum. You know, you're doing a big gig and you know there's a PA's huge. You don't need that in your ear. You don't need that in your ear. So turn the monitors off, go and speak to the sound person, introduce yourself, tell them the situation, and they will be cool because they know all about problems with the hearing, you know? So turn monitors off, so that way I can set up with no problems. And then what I do is, and I think this is another important piece of information, I get the volume on stage to go up in increments of 15%. So I say, can you give me a little bit of my voice? And I say 15% of my voice. And the sound person goes, okay. And then you get a little bit more. And I think once I go past a certain point, I ask myself, is this insecurity? Am I being insecure because it's a big gig, there's a lot of people? Do I really need this extra sound? In most cases, probably not. And that what that does is that you keep the volume on stage really low, and you can do it. But again, you've got to train your brain, you've got to be proactive, because what I see a lot of the time amongst musicians, and you know, I don't talk about this subject. When I'm backstage, I'm not talking about this because nobody wants to hear this backstage, you know? But when I get talking about the fact, why have I got 3 sets of earplugs with me? And I say, well, you know, I struggle with tinnitus. I kid you not, Rupert, there's always one guy in the band that goes, yeah, I'm really worried about it too. Or, oh man, my tinnitus is really good. And I'm like, so let me get this right. You've got bad tinnitus. And like, yeah, I got really bad tinnitus. I'm like, well, why are you not taking care of your ears? Why are you not wearing earplugs? Why are you, do you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's because musicians, there's a bridge for musicians to cross, especially amongst musicians of my age, our sort of generation. It's almost like the younger generation, they're really proactive. They're like, yeah, I got in-ear monitors, I'm taking care. They don't want nothing to do with tinnitus. You know, they're like, no, I'm taking care of. But a lot of the older musicians are like, oh, well, I've been fine up to now. And I'm like, I don't, you know, that's why I really feel the need to share this information with people, because musicians tend to think they're going to be okay. But there's a statistic that I'd like to share with you.
Please do, Jack.
They did a survey here in Norway. They found that the 38.7% of musicians suffer some form of hearing loss. Okay. But the scary thing here is that they found that 20% suffer chronic tinnitus. That means that if you are backstage and there's 2 bands backstage and there happens to be 5 members in each band, 2 of those guys are going to suffer life-changing chronic tinnitus. That's a numbers game. That's just a numbers game. I mean, why would you take that chance? Because it's just a numbers game.
You're absolutely right, Jack. And I do the same thing whenever I mainly live in studios these days. I just like it. And, you know, as a kind of a sideman, as a drummer, although obviously I produce music, it's like I'm mainly doing recordings. But whenever I play live, I do exactly the same as you, Jack. I just say, they say, what do you want? No monitors, thanks very much. It's like, what? And I explain the situation, and they're really pleased about it. For a sound guy, it's actually great. It means that you're not getting insurmountable feedback problems. And I do the same. It's like, so you and I have had this problem for many years. For me, it's since I was 22. So from the time of 22, I've had earplugs of all descriptions since that. You talk about a wallet. My wallet is just over there with olive oil. And my wallet, I have different types of wallets. I have in one wallet, I have 4 types of earplugs, all from this company called ACS. That's the ones I use. They're molded earplugs, from yellow to all sorts of colors, from all sorts of attenuation. So again, it's like we're talking about the toolkit. We're talking about the same things, Jack, exactly the same problems and the way that we solve those problems. Now, I have another question, and you talk about adapting, and I love that word. So, and you've sort of mentioned it, but I want to get straight in there with the musicians. So if you're working with a team of musicians, whether it's your own project or whether it's with the other people, and you have talked about it, but It's very difficult for some people to talk about this, and we both appreciate that, but I know that you are vocal, you're very polite, but you tell everybody your situation, don't you? And you want them, if it's possible, well, it has to be possible, but you'll do it in a way where you're not rude. You want them to adapt, don't you? It's important.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's a big question for musicians to ask themselves. Should they be open about their tinnitus or not? And I know it's a difficult question because it's involving people's finance. It's involved, you know, it's their decision to take. They have to sort of decide whether they want to be open about it. I went through the similar sort of worries, you know, about 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, if I start telling people that I've got tinnitus, I could lose gigs, I could lose money, I could lose income. But I felt the need to sort of share my story and hopefully inspire and help other people by sharing it. Once I crossed that bridge, I got to the point now where I don't care anymore. I'm like, I'll tell people, I say, look, and the reason why I don't care anymore is because I'm not in a position, I'm too old and I've been around the block too many times to worry about being cool. Many years ago, and I say this to any younger musicians, it's such a cool industry. It's such based on image and blah, 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 blah. It's all a bunch of rubbish. It means nothing. I've been around some of the biggest producers in the world. I've been around some of the best musicians in the world. They don't care about being cool, let me tell you. They don't care. They don't care one iota about being cool. What they care about is the work. And that's something that's information that young musicians don't know. They think that it's all about being cool. But when you get to the, you know, I've recorded with some great producers and musicians, they don't care about being cool. And they don't necessarily want the musicians in the room to be cool either. They can't stand that, you know. So I'm very open about it because I have to be open about it because I can't have any mistakes. You know, one rim shot, one snare shot, it can really damage me. So I have to be open. So I was in London in 2019. We were recording in a studio with a bunch of really top guys, and we were recording for a big company doing a promo for them. It was all top of the line stuff, and they wanted to film the band in this live room. We were in a very famous studio, and it was a beautiful, you know, place. They wanted a shot of the band all together, and I said, that's not possible, I'm afraid. And again, for someone like me that spent 2 years in a room the size of a cardboard box with one of the most powerful drummers I've ever met, you know, he was 19, you know, he all muscle, you know, this guy used to smack these drums like, you know, nobody's business. For me to stand there and say, I can't be in the same room as a drummer was very weird, but that's my reality and I have to embrace that reality. And I want to say that not a single person on that session, and remember these are top guys, not one of them had a problem with it. They were like, Jack, it's no problem. We'll find solutions. We'll find a way around it. And the reason why I feel so strongly about that is because if you are a musician with tinnitus, it's now your job to find ways to stay in the game, to find ways of actually staying a musician. And you can only throw yourself up against the wall so many times. You can be a tough guy and think you can keep going, but at some point, you're not going to be able to get back up. So what that means is that if you are struggling with your tinnitus and you are a musician, you've got to tell people and you've got to say, look, I'm going to perform as good as I've ever done. I might even perform better, but I need to take these precautions. So my gigs, my songwriting is much better than it's ever been, even though I have this really bad tinnitus.
Brilliant.
But if I wasn't open about it, like when I do gigs and I go up to the sound person, 10, 15 years ago, I would have been really conscious of it. I would have been really embarrassed. How do you go up to a sound person and say, you know, you're supposed to perform in front of however many people and, you know, I've got bad, you know, tinnitus. But now I just don't care. I say, look, I got really bad tinnitus. Can we work together on this? And most of the time, the sound people will be like, absolutely, man, no problem. We got you covered. Tell us what you need. And I'll get up on stage and I'll do the best gig I've ever done because that's who I am. I'm not going to change as a musician. But I can't do that gig if I'm not open. If I don't tell the sound person, if I don't talk to people, you know. And I really want to say that to younger musicians, because it's so difficult, man. It's so difficult. You're a young musician. You're in your early 20s. You want to be cool. You want to please everyone. You're just grateful that you're in a studio. And I want to let younger musicians know that, and I want to keep repeating this message. It doesn't matter that you're opening for a bigger artist. It doesn't matter that you're in a big recording studio and the producer's so and so. Nobody cares, man. You got to go up and talk to that person. If you have tinnitus, you should do it anyway. But go up to that person and say, look, I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to do a great job. But can you reduce my headphone mix? Or can I be in control of my headphone mix? Or can you turn the monitors off? And it's so vital for older musicians to tell the younger musicians that it's okay. And most sound people, they don't care. They're cool with it.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yes, and you're absolutely right. They are. I've got a couple of, well, 3 lovely questions that have just come in. And I wanted to ask this, and it's come at the right time. It's lovely, perfect timing. Have you ever suffered, Jack, from hyperacusis with tinnitus? And if you have, how did you manage to overcome this, please?
I haven't. I have been sensitive to sound, and but I haven't suffered. I know that some people suffer from that a lot, and they really have my sympathies, because that must be a difficult to add on top. What I will say is that because I don't have it bad, whenever I felt sensitive to sound, I've made sure that I expose myself to that sound. And it's hard for me to really comment because I don't have that condition. But what I can say is that as soon as I start feeling that I'm becoming sensitive to sound, I make sure that I expose myself to it. It's a sort of a game that I play. So say, for example, with the dishes in the kitchen. Now, to someone who doesn't have tinnitus, they'll be like, what's that got to do with it? But like the sound of dishes in the kitchen, clink, clunk, you know, that can become a bit of a problem. And I make sure that I expose myself to that sound so that I don't become sensitive to it. So if there's any way to build up your resistance to it, I would encourage you to do it. If you can do it in a way that's not painful and that's not damaging to your ears, I would encourage you to not go too far into isolating your ears and protecting them too much, because you can't protect yourself against all sound. So I can't comment on that. I don't have that. But like I say, I make sure that I don't get too obsessive about protecting my ears, like dogs barking. I have a little dog. Of course, I don't enjoy it, but if it happens, I expose myself to it. And I sort of make a mental note. This is something that I really sort of, I also try and do. I make a sound diary. And what that means is make a mental note of the sound that you've been exposed to. Did it affect you? How did you feel about it? And once you have that piece of information, you now have a piece of information for the next time you're exposed to it. Say, for example, a car horn. If a car honks its horn near you, you know, as people with tinnitus, we get really worried, right? Yeah. But if you're exposed to that and you make a mental note, you create a sound diary and say, actually, no, it didn't do anything. So the next time it happens, you're not too worried about it. But I know this is a very sensitive area and I can't really comment, and I'm really conscious of not talking about things that I don't know about, because this is such a complicated and such a delicate, sensitive area, tinnitus as a whole, I mean. So I can't comment with any real authority on that, about that condition. And my sympathies go out to anyone with that condition, because it must be very difficult. But I think with people that have tinnitus, it's important to not become too obsessive about protecting your ears. That's just my interpretation. Of course, don't damage your ears, don't expose them to loud noises, but don't obsess too much with like the sound of day-to-day life, like, you know, dogs barking, plates, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think it's a great answer. Absolutely super answer. I've had hyperacusis, and I know a lot of people have had hyperacusis, but you know what you're offering and the advice that you're just giving there from a person that is respectful of it, but you know exactly what you've just said is certainly, there was nothing wrong there at all. Any of that information that you're saying suggests all the right things and all the right maneuvers that you have to put in place mentally. It's a superb answer, Jack. I've got another lovely question here from one of our beloved members of the community, and it is, I am also a musician. I am 63, back into music during COVID. It is a silver lining for me. I have had tinnitus for 10 years. I am aware that exposing myself to music increases the tinnitus level activity rather obviously. These spikes, are they to be looked at as gradual damage growth and ultimately your body alarm warning you that you will go deaf? Or is it just the tinnitus just spiking, and will it go down again to my original levels?
That's difficult to answer. First off, I think it's great that you're getting back into music. I think that it's important that even though we suffer from tinnitus, I think it's important to still try and enjoy the things we like doing, because that's just life. That's, you know, we only have one life and we've got to try and enjoy it the best we can. It's the same with me. I'm a songwriter. If I was to give up songwriting, it would be a big part of my sort of what I feel is my existence on this planet. So, or the essence of my existence on this planet. So I encourage people to try and continue doing what they like despite of the tinnitus. So that's a great thing that you're getting back into music. Do spikes come and go? It's difficult. It's such a subjective thing. The spike that I went through during January that I mentioned earlier on, it hasn't gone back down, but I've accepted it. So I've sort of moved on from it. It doesn't make it go away, but I've just had to move on. So spikes are difficult. They often do go down, is my experience. And remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a sort of a medical person in any shape or capacity. I'm just a guy with tinnitus. So any sort of knowledge I give is just my own experiences, and it's not backed up by any sort of medical knowledge. But spikes, in my experience, do go up and do go down. So I don't necessarily think that a spike is going to stay where it is. Like I'm hopeful that my spike will go down. And if the spike doesn't go down, what I think kicks in is some form of habituation. That does seem to always follow a spike, is my experience at least, because the brain just gets bored of that sound. You know, after a while, the brain is it's interested in things that interest it. It's not interested in that sound in your head. So I think what habituation to me means is that after a while, your brain just gets bored of it. It's like, oh God, this tone is so uninteresting. So let me think of, what else is going on, So spikes, they come and go. It's what we were saying earlier on. Habituation comes and goes. It's fluid. I think what is important is to remember that it's your life. If you like doing music, keep doing it. Be careful, protect your ears, but it's important to sort of do what you enjoy. And whether your spike goes up and down, that's going to happen. It's like, it's like the tide, really. It's going to change. But if you stay strong in your mind and you do stuff that you like, which in your case is music, then that will get you through it.
That's superb, Jack. Absolutely fantastic. I love your take on and your own personal experience. And you are an expert at having your own tinnitus, Jack. You really are. You really understand yourself so very well. Certainly explaining about habituation and spikes. I think that's really brilliantly insightful. It's so helpful. What we're going to do now, Jack, is that we have to finish now. Our hour is nearly up. And before I end it, personally, on a very personal level, I'd just like to say thank you ever so much, Jack Rubinacci. I think it's just incredible. You've followed us and supported us right from the beginning, and we've been in touch, and it's a real pleasure to kind of meet you in cyber person, but I am meeting you and I'm touching your soul, and I'm getting everything for you. And I love so much where you're coming from as a tinnitus activist, as an artist, and greatly as a person, Jack. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate that.
Your time out. It's incredible. So could you tell people, please, about where people could find your record, and also where they could find your book, and just to go over the title again, and we will share it also, Jack, and we'd like to share it with the Australian Tinnitus Association as well. And they were making wonderful overtures that are very positive, saying they would love to have that also. So it would be great to be able to get this into the community. And please tell us more about it, where we get it from.
Yep. I'm available on all the social medias as Jack Rubinacci. I have a website called helpmytinnitus.com, where if people sign up to the newsletter, they can get sort of newsletters and free tips and tools as I go. My books are available on Amazon. The first book is called Overcoming Tinnitus, 12 Tools That Help Me Overcome Tinnitus. And that's a generalized sort of what I think are the basic tools that you need to sort of cope. And the second book is A Musician With Tinnitus, 14 Tools That Help Me Perform and Cope. And that's specifically directed at musicians on little tips that they can do to sort of stay in the game with tinnitus. And they're both available on Amazon. But I feel it's really important to tell people also that, you know, I do this because I want to inspire people. I want to give people information, and I want to let them know that it gets difficult. You've got to be proactive. You've got to protect your ears. That's not, you know, that's not negotiable. You've got to protect your ears. You've got to be proactive, but you've also got to keep doing what you love doing. And I really want people to know that. But to do that, you've got to be proactive. And I hope that this meeting has sort of helped in some small way. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, please feel free to do that.
It's fantastic, Jack. Thank you. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to round it up, but we'll leave in a minute, Jack, but we're going to invite you back just personally so we can just say thanks anyhow, if that's okay. But we're going to do another discussion for everybody next week. So it'll be our discussion group, and we'll have another tea talk in another month's time. You can find our website on www.t-minus.info. Instagram, we are Tinnitus Minus. We're on Twitter. Facebook, we have a private little group called Tinnitus Minus, the Tinnitus Wellness Support Group. And you can find us on LinkedIn. And please check out the T-Minus Wellness app. Thanks ever so much, Jack, again. And thank you to everybody for joining this wonderful evening of Tinnitus Talk. Thanks, Jack. Bye-bye. Thank you.